My future daughter-in-law smiled sweetly at me across the dinner table while calling me a pathetic old woman in French, completely unaware that I had spent 3 years living in Paris. She thought her secret was safe. She was about to discover how wrong she could be. Before we proceed, we want to appreciate you for watching Granny's narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from in the comment. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a humid September evening in Phoenix when my son Michael finally brought home the woman he had been mysteriously dating for 8 months. Elena Rousseau was everything he had described and more. She possessed that effortless European elegance that American women spend fortunes trying to achieve. Her English was flawless with just enough of a French accent to be enchanting rather than difficult to understand. Michael had met her at a gallery opening downtown. She was studying the same painting he was admiring, a piece by a local artist depicting the Arizona desert at sunset. Their conversation about art and culture had lasted 3 hours, flowing from the gallery to a nearby wine bar and then to an all-night diner where they talked until dawn. At least, that was the story he told me with stars in his eyes. Elena greeted me with the warmth I had always hoped for in a daughter-in-law. She brought flowers from her own garden, complimented my home with genuine appreciation, and asked thoughtful questions about the family photographs covering my mantelpiece. After years of watching Michael date women who treated me like an inconvenient obstacle to their relationship, Elena felt like a gift from heaven. During dinner, she shared stories about her childhood in Lyon, her work as a translator for international businesses, and her dreams of starting her own consulting firm. She spoke passionately about French literature, asked intelligent questions about American politics, and even helped me serve dessert without being asked. Michael watched her with the kind of adoration that made my heart both soar and worry. Love that intense could lead to either profound happiness or devastating heartbreak. The evening was perfect until it suddenly wasn't. Michael excused himself to take an urgent call from his business partner about a construction emergency. Elena and I continued chatting while I cleared the table, her melodic voice filling the kitchen with stories about French cuisine and family traditions. Then her phone rang. She answered in rapid French, her voice carrying the casual assumption that comes with speaking a private language. She was wrong about the privacy part. My 3 years working as a nanny for a wealthy family in Paris had left me with more than just memories and photographs. My French was still sharp enough to understand every devastating word. "Bonjour maman," she said, settling into the living room chair with her back to the kitchen. Yes, the dinner went exactly as planned. She is even more gullible than Michael described. My hands stopped moving as I processed what I had just heard. Elena continued speaking, her voice light and conversational as she destroyed everything I thought I knew about her. The house is worth at least $1 million, maybe more. Michael was not exaggerating about the family money. His father left them very comfortable, and she mentioned some investment properties. This will be even easier than we thought. I forced myself to keep washing dishes, to maintain the normal sounds of cleanup while my world collapsed around me. Elena laughed at something her mother said, a sound that had seemed musical moments before but now felt cold and calculating. "Do not worry about the timeline. Michael is completely infatuated. I could probably get him to propose next month if I wanted, but it is better to wait until after the holidays. More romantic timing, and it gives me more time to learn about their financial situation." The plate I was holding slipped from my numb fingers and shattered against the tile floor. Elena appeared in the doorway immediately, her face a perfect mask of concern and helpfulness. "Mrs. Peterson, are you hurt? Please let me clean this up. You should not be doing this after cooking such a wonderful meal for us." She knelt gracefully to collect the broken pieces, her movements elegant and considerate. The woman who had just finished explaining to her mother how she planned to manipulate my son was now tenderly caring for me like the loving daughter-in-law she pretended to be. "I am always so clumsy when I am tired," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. "In France, we have a saying that broken dishes bring good luck. Perhaps this is a sign of good fortune for our families coming together." Another lie delivered with such sincerity that I almost believed it myself. Almost. Michael returned from his call full of apologies and immediately noticed us cleaning up together. His face lit up with the kind of joy that made me want to cry. "Look at you two already taking care of each other like family." Elena stood gracefully and smiled at him with perfect warmth. "Your mother is wonderful, Michael. I can see where you get your kind heart from." We settled back in the living room for coffee, and Elena continued her performance flawlessly. Every story, every laugh, every gentle touch of Michael's hand was designed to reinforce the narrative she had constructed. The struggling artist who had found stability with a good American man. The cultured European woman charmed by our family values. The grateful immigrant ready to build a new life with the right partner. Michael hung on every word. His eyes soft with the kind of love that makes intelligent people do incredibly foolish things. When Elena excused herself to use the bathroom, he turned to me with excitement radiating from every pore. "Mom, I think I am going to propose soon. Maybe Thanksgiving. I know it seems fast, but when you know. Right." The words felt like broken glass in my throat. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. She seems very happy here." "Yes. She keeps talking about how different American men are from French men. How much more family-oriented we are. She wants children, Mom. Can you imagine? Little ones running around here for holidays." I managed to smile and nod while my heart shattered into pieces. Elena returned from the bathroom and settled back beside Michael, her hand finding his with practiced ease. They looked so perfect together, so genuinely connected, that for a moment I almost convinced myself I had misunderstood her phone conversation. But I knew what I had heard. Elena Rousseau was not the woman she claimed to be, and my son was walking straight into a trap that would destroy him financially and emotionally. The question was what I could do about it without losing Michael forever in the process. After they left that night, I sat in my late husband's study surrounded by 40 years of financial documents and family records. Robert had been careful with money, building a portfolio that would ensure my comfortable retirement and leave Michael with a substantial inheritance. The house alone was worth over $1 million, sitting on 3 acres in one of Phoenix's most exclusive neighborhoods. Add in the investment properties, retirement accounts, and life insurance policies, and Elena was looking at a very attractive target indeed. What chilled me most was her casual confidence during that phone conversation. This was not impulsive opportunism. This was calculated predation by someone who had clearly done this before. She had assessed our family's financial situation with professional efficiency and was already planning her strategy for maximum extraction. By morning I had made 2 critical decisions. First, I would not confront Michael directly about what I had overheard. His infatuation was too deep, and any accusation from me would only drive him closer to her while casting me as the jealous mother who could not accept her son's happiness. Second, I needed to know exactly who Elena Rousseau really was before I could figure out how to protect Michael from her. I started with basic internet searches. Elena's social media presence was polished but strangely shallow. Her Instagram account showed beautiful photos of French countryside, art galleries, and sophisticated dinners, but very few included other people. No childhood friends tagged in throwback photos, no family gatherings, no workplace colleagues. For someone supposedly in her early 30s with a career in international business, her digital footprint felt manufactured. Her LinkedIn profile claimed she had worked for various consulting firms in Lyon and Paris, but the company names were vague and there were no professional recommendations or colleague connections. The work history read like something created from internet research rather than lived experience. I was deep in my investigation when Michael called, his voice bright with excitement about his relationship and future plans. "Elena and I have been talking about Thanksgiving," he said. "Would it be okay if she joins us? She does not have any family in America, and I want her to feel welcome here." "Of course," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "That sounds perfect. Maybe she could share some French traditions with us too. Make it special. Actually, that is a great idea. She has been homesick lately. Maybe we could do something that reminds her of home." As Michael chatted enthusiastically about incorporating French elements into our Thanksgiving celebration, I was already planning how to use the extra time to investigate Elena more thoroughly. A holiday gathering would give me opportunities to observe her behavior, ask subtle questions, and maybe even create situations that would reveal cracks in her carefully constructed facade. After hanging up, I made a call to my sister's daughter, Rachel, who worked in immigration law in Los Angeles. "I need some advice about something," I said carefully. "It is about Michael's girlfriend. Aunt Barbara, please tell me he is not rushing into marriage with someone he barely knows." "Not yet, but I am worried about the timeline. She is here on a tourist visa, and he is talking about proposing soon." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "How much do you know about her background? Her immigration status?" "Not enough, which is why I am calling you." Over the next hour, Rachel walked me through the warning signs of immigration fraud and the common patterns used by people seeking to exploit American citizens for green cards and financial gain. The profile she described matched Elena's situation with frightening accuracy. Rapid relationship progression, vague work history, limited verifiable background, and financial targeting of established American families. Rachel's concerns deepened when I described Elena's sophisticated knowledge of our family's assets after just one dinner. "Aunt Barbara, professional marriage fraud is more common than people think. These operations often target successful, lonely men through carefully orchestrated meetings that seem coincidental. Art galleries, bookstores, coffee shops, anywhere cultured Americans might encounter sophisticated foreign women." The art gallery. Michael's story about their romantic first meeting suddenly felt less like destiny and more like a hunting expedition. What should I do? I cannot accuse her without proof, but I cannot sit back and watch Michael destroy his life either. "You need evidence," Rachel said firmly. "Real documentation of fraudulent activity. Without that, you are just a concerned mother with suspicions." That afternoon I hired a private investigator. Marcus Chen came recommended by Rachel's law firm, and his credentials were impeccable. He was a former federal agent who specialized in fraud cases, with particular expertise in immigration-related crimes. "Mrs. Peterson," he said during our initial meeting, "what you are describing sounds like a sophisticated operation. If your suspicions are correct, Elena Rousseau is likely part of a larger network that targets wealthy American families systematically." A network. These operations rarely work alone. There are handlers who identify targets, create false identities, provide coaching and support, and take a percentage of whatever assets they extract. If Elena is professional marriage fraud, she has help. The investigation took 3 weeks, and every day brought more disturbing revelations. Elena's work history in France was largely fabricated. The consulting firms she claimed to represent either did not exist or had never heard of her. Her visa application contained subtle inconsistencies that suggested professional coaching in how to answer immigration questions. Most damning of all, Marcus discovered evidence that Elena had used at least 2 other identities in the past. Sophie Martin, who had married and quickly divorced a wealthy businessman in Seattle. Marie Leclerc, who had bilked a retired professor in Portland out of his life savings before disappearing. The same face, the same methods, the same systematic destruction of American families. "She is not just a fraud," Marcus explained during our final meeting. "She is a career criminal who has perfected the art of romantic manipulation for profit. The conservative estimate is that she has stolen over $500,000 from American men in the past 3 years. What about her family in France? The stories about growing up in Lyon. All fiction. Her real background is much more modest. She grew up in a working-class suburb of Paris, dropped out of university, and apparently discovered that romance scams were more profitable than traditional employment. As Marcus laid out the evidence, I felt sick thinking about Michael's plans for a Thanksgiving proposal. Elena was not just lying about her background. She was systematically destroying my son's life while he fell deeper in love with a woman who did not exist. But the most chilling revelation came last. Marcus had connected Elena to a network of at least 6 other women running similar operations across the American Southwest. They shared information about targets, coordinated their activities to avoid overlap, and supported each other with fake references and manufactured backgrounds. "This is not a crime of passion, Mrs. Peterson. This is organized fraud on a significant scale, and your son is just their latest target. That night, I sat in my garden watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere across the city, Michael was probably having dinner with his fraudulent girlfriend, discussing wedding plans and dreaming about their future together. In 2 days, they would join me for Thanksgiving dinner, where she would continue her performance while planning his financial and emotional destruction. But Elena had made one crucial mistake in targeting our family. She had assumed that a 68-year-old widow would be easy to fool, too polite to ask difficult questions, too grateful for her son's happiness to look closely at its source. She was about to learn that assumption could be very dangerous indeed. I had a plan, and it was going to require the performance of my lifetime. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear, perfect weather for family gatherings and emotional reckonings. I had spent the previous day preparing Michael's favorite dishes while mentally rehearsing the confrontation that would either save my son or destroy our relationship forever. Michael and Elena arrived at noon, carrying flowers and wine like the perfect guests they appeared to be. Elena kissed my cheeks in the French style and complimented my cooking with what seemed like genuine appreciation. She wore an elegant burgundy dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she looked every inch the sophisticated European woman about to become an American bride. Michael was practically vibrating with nervous energy, and I noticed him patting his jacket pocket repeatedly. The engagement ring was there, waiting for the perfect moment after dinner when he would ask the woman he loved to spend her life with him. If only he knew what that life would actually entail. The early part of the meal proceeded like a Norman Rockwell painting. We shared what we were grateful for, with Elena offering touching words about finding love and family in America. Michael talked about his business success and his excitement about building a future with Elena. I spoke about the blessing of watching my son find happiness. All lies in their own way. As we moved from dinner to dessert, Michael's nervousness became more obvious. He kept checking his watch and fidgeting with his napkin. Elena seemed to sense something significant was coming and played her part perfectly, laughing at his jokes and touching his hand with gentle affection. "Elena," Michael said suddenly, standing up from the table. "There is something I want to say." This was it. The moment of truth was arriving faster than I had expected, and I was not ready. But as Michael reached into his jacket pocket, Elena's phone rang with an urgent tone. "I am so sorry," she said, glancing at the screen. "This is my mother. She has been having health problems, and I told her to call if there was an emergency." She stepped into the living room to take the call, speaking in rapid French while Michael waited anxiously with the ring box in his hand. And that was when Elena made her final, fatal mistake. She thought she was speaking privately. She thought her secret was safe. She had no idea that I was listening to every word as she reported to her handler about the success of her operation. "The proposal is happening right now," she said in French. "He has the ring ready and the timing is perfect. The family dinner, the emotional setting. He is completely under my control." Michael was still standing at the table, ring box in hand, completely unaware that the woman he loved was describing him like a fish on a hook. Yes, the financial assessment was accurate. The house alone is worth more than we estimated, and there are additional properties. Plus he mentioned a family trust that should be accessible after marriage. We are looking at a significant payday. I walked quietly to the living room doorway, close enough to hear every word while remaining out of sight. Elena continued her conversation with cold professional efficiency. "The timeline will be aggressive. Spring wedding, green card application immediately, and I can probably initiate the divorce proceedings within 18 months. 2 years maximum. Then I disappear with American citizenship and enough money to retire in comfort." She laughed at something her handler said, a sound that made my blood freeze. The American men are so predictable. Show them some culture, some sophistication, make them feel like heroes rescuing a damsel in distress, and they will give you everything they own. That was the moment I stepped into the living room and spoke in perfect French. "How fascinating. Please tell your handler that the damsel in distress routine needs work." It was a bit too obvious. Elena spun around, her face going white as she saw me standing there. She ended the call immediately, but the damage was done. We both knew what I had heard, and we both knew that everything was about to change. Michael appeared in the doorway behind me, still holding the ring box, confusion written across his face. "Mom, what is going on? Why are you speaking French?" "Because your girlfriend has been speaking French all evening, sweetheart. And she has been saying some very interesting things about our family." Elena recovered quickly. I had to give her credit for that. She switched to English and adopted an expression of innocent confusion that would have been convincing if I had not just heard her true plans. "Mrs. Peterson, I think there has been some misunderstanding. I was just talking to my mother about how you plan to marry my son for citizenship and money, then divorce him within 2 years after stealing everything you can get your hands on." Yes, I heard that part quite clearly. Michael stared back and forth between us, the ring box forgotten in his hand. "What are you talking about? Elena, what is she saying?" For a moment, Elena seemed to consider maintaining her facade. Then she looked at my face and realized that the game was over. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The French accent was gone, replaced by flat, unaccented English that could have come from anywhere in America. "Well, this is unfortunate." She sat down calmly and looked at Michael with something that might have been pity. "Michael, you are a sweet man, but you were always just a means to an end. The romance, the cultural exchange, the shared dreams about our future together. All of it was research and performance." Michael went white. "What? Did you really think someone like me would fall for someone like you without an ulterior motive?" She gestured dismissively. "You are predictable, Michael. The kind of man who thinks buying dinner and opening doors makes him irresistible to sophisticated European women." The cruelty was breathtaking. She was not just confessing her fraud. She was destroying him for sport, ensuring that the emotional damage would last long after the financial theft was prevented. The accent, the stories about France, my career in consulting, all of it was constructed specifically to appeal to your psychological profile. "I spent 2 weeks studying your social media before I ever approached you at that gallery." Michael sat down heavily, like his legs could no longer support him. "The gallery? Our meeting? Carefully planned. I knew you would be there because you posted about the opening on Facebook. I researched the artist, memorized talking points that would interest you, and positioned myself near the painting I knew you would gravitate toward." She smiled coldly. "You made it very easy. A divorced man in his 30s, successful but lonely, with clear interests in art and culture and obvious family money. You were exactly the kind of target we look for." "We?" "Yes." Elena looked at me with undisguised hatred. "You think you have won something, old woman. You have no idea what you have just stepped into." She pulled out her phone and made a call, speaking in English now since her cover was blown. "Marcus, we have a problem. The operation is compromised." The mother figured out the French connection. She listened for a moment, then continued. "Yes, I understand. Initiate the cleanup protocol for the Phoenix target. We will need to move faster on the other operations to compensate for this loss." Other operations. How many families were they targeting simultaneously? Elena hung up and looked at both of us with cold calculation. "Michael, your mother has just cost you more than she saved you. This network has been operating for years. We have resources, connections, and experience in dealing with interfering family members." She stood up gracefully, smoothing her dress. "I would have divorced you cleanly in 2 years and disappeared. Now things are going to get much more complicated for your family." The threat was clear, and it sent ice through my veins. Elena was not just an individual fraudster. She was part of something larger and more dangerous than I had realized. But as she walked toward the door, she made one final mistake. She turned back to Michael with genuine curiosity in her voice. "I am curious, Michael. Did you really believe all of it? The stories about my childhood, the romantic connection, the shared dreams? Or was there some part of you that knew it was too good to be true?" Michael looked up at her with eyes full of pain and something else. Something harder. "I believed all of it," he said quietly. "Every single word. 'Cause that is what love means. Trust, faith. The assumption that the person you care about is being honest with you." He stood up slowly, still holding the ring box. "But you know what the really sad part is, Elena? The person you pretended to be. That woman would have had everything she claimed to want. A man who adored her, financial security, a family who welcomed her with open arms. He looked directly at her. Instead, you get nothing. No money, no citizenship, no love, no family. Nothing but whatever payment your handlers give you before they move you on to the next target. For the first time since her mask had come off, Elena looked genuinely affected by something he had said. But she recovered quickly and headed for the door without another word. That was 6 months ago. The investigation that followed Elena's departure revealed the scope of the network she had been part of. Federal agents arrested 12 people across 6 states, including the handlers who had been coordinating the marriage fraud operations. Elena herself disappeared before they could apprehend her, but her real identity was eventually discovered. Her name was Christina Walsh, and she was wanted for fraud in multiple states. The authorities believe she has fled the country, probably using yet another false identity. The investigation also revealed 4 other victims in our region alone, men whose lives had been systematically destroyed by the same network that had targeted Michael. Michael struggled for months with trust issues and depression. The woman he had fallen in love with had never existed, and the betrayal ran deeper than just the financial fraud. She had stolen his faith in love itself, his ability to believe that genuine connection was possible. But slowly, with therapy and time, he began to heal. The experience taught him valuable lessons about taking relationships slowly, asking difficult questions, and trusting his instincts when something feels too perfect to be true. As for me, I learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means making choices that temporarily damage your relationship with them. Michael was angry with me for months, feeling that I had manipulated him almost as much as Elena had. But eventually, he understood that I had acted out of love, not control. The real tragedy is not just what happened to our family, but what happened to all the other families destroyed by Elena and her network. Professional romance fraud is more common than most people realize, and the victims are often too embarrassed to report it or seek help. The warning signs are always there if you know what to look for. Rapid relationship progression, vague personal history, limited verifiable background, and especially pressure to make quick commitments around marriage or finances. If something feels too good to be true, it probably is. Michael is dating again now, taking things slowly and being more careful about who he trusts. He has learned to appreciate authenticity over sophistication, genuine connection over perfect chemistry. It was a hard lesson, but it may have saved him from an even worse fate down the road. Elena Rousseau never existed, but the damage she caused was very real. The only satisfaction I take from this whole experience is knowing that her network has been dismantled and that other families have been spared what we went through. Sometimes the best way to protect someone is to risk their anger in the short term to save them from devastation in the long term. Sometimes love means being willing to be the villain in someone's story if it prevents them from becoming a victim in someone else's. The weeks following Elena's departure were filled with police interviews, federal investigations, and painful conversations with other victims of the network. Michael threw himself into his work, avoiding any discussion of relationships or romance. I worried that Elena had damaged him permanently, that he would never again be able to trust his own judgment about love and connection. But human resilience is remarkable. Slowly, Michael began to emerge from his protective shell. He started attending therapy, joined a support group for fraud victims, and gradually began to rebuild his confidence. The experience had changed him, made him more cautious and analytical, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about recognizing authentic connection versus manufactured chemistry. One evening, about 8 months after the confrontation, Michael came to dinner at my house. He seemed lighter somehow, more like his old self, but with a new depth that came from surviving real betrayal and choosing to trust again despite the risk. "Mom," he said over dessert, "I want to thank you for what you did. I know I was angry for months, felt like you had treated me like a child who could not make his own decisions. But you saved me from something that would have destroyed my life completely." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You would have figured it out eventually, sweetheart. You are too smart to be fooled forever." "Maybe," he said, "but by then it would have been too late. Elena was good at her job. She had studied exactly how to keep men like me hooked and compliant. If you had not intervened when you did, I probably would be married to her by now, completely unaware that my wife was systematically stealing everything I had worked for. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Elena's network and their methods. They used sophisticated psychological profiling to identify targets, employed professional coaching to perfect their romantic personas, and had even developed detailed training materials for conducting marriage fraud operations. The FBI estimated that the network had stolen over $2 million from American victims over a 3-year period. Michael had become something of an advocate for fraud awareness, speaking at community events about the warning signs of romance scams and helping other victims navigate the legal and emotional aftermath of being targeted. His experience with Elena had given him unique insights into how these operations work and how they can be prevented. The real Elena Rousseau, the woman whose identity had been stolen, eventually contacted us through the FBI. She was horrified to learn that her name and background had been used to defraud American families, and she wanted to express her sincere apologies for the pain caused by someone using her identity. She was a kindergarten teacher in Lyon, married with 2 young children, and had been completely unaware that her social media presence was being harvested to create a false romantic persona. We exchanged several letters through official channels, and she sent photographs of the real Lyon neighborhood where she lived, the actual consulting firm where she had worked briefly years earlier, and the family members whose stories Elena had appropriated and twisted. It was both comforting and surreal to meet the authentic person behind Elena's elaborate fiction. Michael was particularly moved by the real Elena's letters. She had taken time to write detailed explanations of her actual life experiences, providing context for all the stories that the fake Elena had adapted for her con. The real Elena was nothing like the sophisticated international businesswoman that Christina Walsh had portrayed. She was simply a working mother trying to provide for her family, whose personal information had been weaponized by criminals. The legal proceedings took nearly a year to resolve completely. Christina Walsh was eventually arrested in Montreal, using yet another false identity and preparing to target Canadian victims. She was extradited to the United States and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for immigration fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Her handlers received similar sentences, and the network was completely dismantled. During the trial, we learned even more disturbing details about Christina's methods. She had been trained in psychological manipulation techniques specifically designed to exploit the emotional vulnerabilities of recently divorced men. She could adapt her personality and background story to match whatever type of woman her target found most appealing, using social media research and psychological profiling to create the perfect romantic fantasy. The prosecution presented evidence that Christina had destroyed at least 15 families across the country, stealing everything from life savings to college funds for children. Some of her victims had contemplated suicide after discovering the extent of their financial and emotional devastation. She showed no remorse during the trial, viewing her crimes as simply a business venture that had unfortunately been interrupted. Michael testified during the sentencing phase, describing the emotional impact of discovering that the woman he loved had never existed. His words were powerful and heartbreaking, and I was proud of his courage in speaking publicly about such a personal betrayal. The judge referenced his testimony when imposing the maximum sentence, noting that romance fraud causes psychological damage that can last for decades. After the trial ended, Michael seemed to turn a corner in his recovery. He had faced his betrayer in court, seen justice served, and helped ensure that other families would be protected from similar schemes. The experience had given him a sense of closure and purpose that therapy alone could not provide. He began dating again cautiously, taking recommendations from friends and family rather than relying on chance meetings or online platforms. He was upfront with potential partners about his experience with fraud, using it as a way to establish honest communication from the beginning of any relationship. Some women were intimidated by his story, but the right person would appreciate his hard-won wisdom about the difference between authentic connection and manufactured attraction. 2 years after Elena's arrest, Michael met Sarah, a pediatric nurse who worked at the same hospital where he was renovating the children's wing. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on shared values and genuine compatibility rather than dramatic chemistry or exotic appeal. Sarah knew about Michael's experience with Elena from their third date, and she respected both his caution and his commitment to complete honesty in their relationship. I watched Michael and Sarah together and saw something I had never seen during his time with Elena. Relaxation. Comfort. The kind of ease that comes from being with someone who accepts you exactly as you are rather than someone who is performing a role designed to manipulate you. Sarah was intelligent and accomplished, but she was also completely unpretentious. She laughed at Michael's jokes not because they were calculated to charm him, but because she genuinely found them funny. When Michael proposed to Sarah, it was nothing like the dramatic scene he had planned with Elena. They were hiking in the desert outside Phoenix, discussing their dreams for the future, when he simply asked if she wanted to spend the rest of her life having conversations like this one. She said yes, and they sat on a rock watching the sunset while planning their simple, authentic future together. The wedding was small and intimate, held in my backyard with close family and friends. Sarah's parents flew in from Minnesota, bringing warmth and genuine joy to the celebration. There were no exotic accents, no dramatic backstories, no sophisticated European elegance. Just two people who had found each other and chosen to build a life based on truth, respect, and genuine affection. During the reception, Michael pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Mom, I need you to know something. What happened with Elena, as horrible as it was, led me to Sarah. I had to learn the hard way what fake love looks like before I could recognize the real thing." He looked across the yard at his new wife, who was laughing with my sister while helping serve cake to the guests. "Sarah loves me for exactly who I am, not for who she needs me to be to serve her purposes. That is a gift I never would have appreciated if I had not experienced the alternative." I watched Sarah throughout the evening, seeing how naturally she fit into our family, how easily she connected with everyone from my elderly aunt to Michael's business partner's young children. She was the kind of person who remembered details about people's lives, who asked follow-up questions about things that mattered to them, who made everyone feel valued and heard. The contrast with Elena's calculated charm could not have been more obvious. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. Elena's attempt to destroy our family had ultimately made it stronger. Michael's experience with betrayal had taught him to value authenticity. My willingness to risk our relationship to protect him had deepened our trust and communication. Even the real Elena in France had benefited, as the FBI investigation had led to improved identity protection services that helped prevent future impersonation. The last guests departed around midnight, leaving Michael, Sarah, and me to clean up the remnants of their perfect imperfect wedding. As we worked together, chatting about the day's highlights and planning their upcoming honeymoon, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with being right about Elena and everything to do with watching my son find genuine happiness. Sarah asked me about my own love story with Michael's father, and I found myself sharing memories I had not talked about in years. The awkward early dates, the misunderstandings that led to deeper conversations, the gradual building of trust and commitment that had sustained us through 40 years of marriage. It was the kind of ordinary, extraordinary love story that cannot be faked or manufactured, only lived. 3 years later, Michael and Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Hope. As I held my granddaughter for the first time, I thought about all the experiences she would never have to endure because her parents had learned to recognize authentic love and reject sophisticated deception. The baby looked up at me with curious eyes, completely innocent of the dangerous world she had been born into but protected by parents who understood the difference between genuine connection and calculated manipulation. She would grow up in a family built on truth, supported by love that had been tested and proven real. Michael has never forgotten the lessons Elena taught him, and he has used that knowledge to help other fraud victims rebuild their lives and learn to trust again. He volunteers with a non-profit organization that provides support and resources to romance scam survivors, and he speaks regularly at community events about recognizing the warning signs of financial and emotional manipulation. His marriage to Sarah continues to thrive because it is built on the foundation of radical honesty and mutual respect that his experience with Elena taught him to value. They communicate openly about everything, from daily frustrations to long-term dreams, creating the kind of partnership that can weather any storm because it is based on reality rather than fantasy. I am proud of the man my son became through surviving Elena's betrayal. He is wiser, more compassionate, and more grateful for authentic relationships than he ever would have been without that painful education. Sometimes our greatest disasters become our most valuable teachers, showing us truths about ourselves and others that we could never have learned in easier circumstances. The network that Elena was part of was completely destroyed, but new schemes emerge constantly as criminals find new ways to exploit people's desire for love and connection. The best protection is education, awareness, and the wisdom to recognize that relationships built on truth may develop more slowly than those built on fantasy, but they are infinitely more valuable and sustainable. As I write this story, Hope is learning to walk, taking tentative steps between her parents with a fearless confidence that comes from knowing she is surrounded by people who will catch her if she falls. She represents everything that Elena tried to destroy and everything that authentic love creates. Hope, trust, and the courage to keep believing in human goodness even after experiencing human evil. Sometimes the most important victories are the ones that prevent disasters rather than creating triumphs. Elena never got the money, the citizenship, or the destruction she planned. Michael found real love instead of sophisticated manipulation. Our family grew stronger instead of being torn apart. And somewhere in France, the real Elena Rousseau continues her quiet life, protected now from the criminals who tried to steal her identity and use it to destroy innocent families. The story of Elena's deception has become a cautionary tale that Michael and I share whenever we encounter families facing similar situations. Love should enhance your life, not threaten it. Romance should build trust, not require constant vigilance. The right person will love you for who you are, not for what you can provide them. These are simple truths, but they can be life-saving when applied to relationships that seem too perfect, too convenient, or too urgent. Real love is patient. It asks questions and waits for honest answers. It grows gradually and deepens over time rather than demanding immediate commitment and unquestioning trust. Michael and Sarah are expecting their second child now, another daughter they plan to name Grace. The name feels appropriate for a family that learned to recognize authentic blessing after surviving sophisticated deception. Grace for second chances, grace for hard-won wisdom, and grace for the courage to keep believing in love even after learning how masterfully it can be faked. Elena Rousseau was the woman who never existed, but the damage she tried to cause was very real. The love that replaced her fiction is equally real, but infinitely more valuable because it is built on truth rather than deception, generosity rather than greed, and genuine care rather than calculated manipulation. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires courage, patience, and the willingness to be temporarily misunderstood. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the truth, even when lies would be more comfortable. Sometimes love means fighting for people who cannot yet see the danger they are in. And sometimes that fight saves not just one person but an entire family's future. The French language that Elena used to hide her true intentions became the tool that exposed her lies and saved my son's life. Language barriers can create opportunities for deception, but they can also become instruments of justice when the right person is listening with the knowledge and courage to act on what they hear. In the end, Elena's story is not really about international fraud or sophisticated deception. It is about the power of authentic love to overcome calculated evil, the importance of family vigilance in protecting those we care about, and the truth that genuine relationships, however ordinary they may seem, are infinitely more valuable than the most elaborate romantic fantasies that criminals can create to exploit our deepest needs for connection and belonging.